Hello, welcome to the Sick Mind channel. Thank you for choosing this video. Today, we are your guest with another crime story. The tragic story of Bobby Joe Stinnett and Lisa Montgomery. This story is one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history, a story that began with a seemingly harmless, shared interest, but ended with unimaginable violence. Listen to the rest of the story. Bobby Joe Stinnett, a 23-year-old woman from Skidmore, Missouri, was about to become a mother in late 2004. 8 months pregnant, she had dedicated her life to raising rat terriers, and the animals were a vital part of her identity and income. Bobby Joe and Lisa Montgomery first met at a dog show. The acquaintance, ostensibly based on their deep shared interest in the breed, quickly spilled over from the real world into the virtual world. Development of online friendship and deception. After their initial meeting, their relationship developed primarily through an online chat room called Ratter Chatter, which was specifically for rat terrier enthusiasts. In this virtual environment, Lisa Montgomery began to create a fake persona. She introduced herself under the pseudonym Fisher Darlene. The most important element of Montgomery's deception was that she pretended to be pregnant and in a similar situation to Bobby Joe. She carefully shared details about her pregnancy, her concerns, and the excitement of motherhood with Bobby Joe. This deep exchange of information created a false trust and an unusual intimacy between the two women. Bobby Joe, who was excited by the shared pregnancy experience with a virtual friend, never realized that she was developing a relationship with someone with sinister intentions. This false trust was the cornerstone of a plot that ultimately led to disaster. Montgomery used this connection to gather detailed information about Bobby Joe's whereabouts, her physical condition, and her probable date of birth. Part 2. The Journey to Crime. Lisa Montgomery's plan to kidnap Bobby Joe's baby, whom she intended to pass off as her own, was meticulously planned. The plan required a long journey and a final meeting. The final meeting and entry into the victim's home. On December 16, 2004, Lisa Montgomery, a Kansas native, began her 281-mile journey to Skidmore, Missouri. She pretended to visit Bobby Joe to buy a rat terrier puppy that had been previously negotiated. When Bobby Joe Stinnett opened the door, it was not the expected Darlene Fisher, but the real Lisa Montgomery. This was the turning point in the story from a business deal to a planned attack. The climax of terror. In a moment of heightened violence and terror, Montgomery forced her way into Bobby Joe's home. The details of the attack reflected a determined determination and prior planning to achieve his goal: strangulation. Montgomery used a rope to severely strangle Bobby Joe. This was done in order to immobilize the victim and prevent any resistance during the subsequent act. Abdominal dissection. After ensuring that Bobby Joe was incapacitated, Montgomery used a scalpel, or similar instrument he had prepared for the task, to slit Bobby Joe Stinnett's abdomen. The operation was performed as an emergency and illegal cesarean section. Montgomery removed the live baby, later determined to be a girl, from her mother's womb and took her with him. Murder. Bobby Joe Stinnett died in his home from severe asphyxiation and massive bleeding from the abdominal dissection. Montgomery immediately left the area after the abduction and returned to Kansas, believing that the victim was dead and that the baby was his. Crime discovery and arrest. A few hours later, Bobby Joe's mother, Wendy Lindley, who was supposed to have lunch with her daughter, went to her home and was confronted with the horrific murder scene. The discovery of Bobby Joe's body and the disappearance of the baby immediately sparked a massive state and federal manhunt. Police quickly became suspicious of Montgomery's identity by following leads and checking Bobby Joe's phone records. After a quick investigation, the FBI arrested Lisa Montgomery in Kansas. The kidnapped child was found alive and well, but the psychological trauma of the incident weighed heavily on everyone involved. Part 3. Shadows of Lisa Montgomery's Past. As the criminal case entered the legal and judicial stages, the focus of the community and the defense team turned to Lisa Montgomery's dark past. The defense argued that her horrific crime was rooted in deep childhood trauma, which would affect her eligibility for execution. Testimony of half-sister Diane Mattingly. Diane Mattingly, Lisa Montgomery's half-sister, was one of the witnesses who gave harrowing testimony about their childhood. Mattingly and Montgomery grew up in a toxic family environment for years. Mattingly recounted that their home was the scene of constant physical, psychological, and sexual abuse by their mother, Jo Shaughnessy, mother Sujo Bobby, and her various partners. The environment was a living hell for the children. After their parents divorced, the sisters' lives diverged. Diane Mattingly was sent to a foster home, which gave her time to get away from the toxic environment and try to heal. But Lisa Montgomery stayed with her mother. According to Mattingly, Lisa's stay there left her completely broken, and her psychological scars never healed. Legal team arguments and request for pardon. Montgomery's legal team made a powerful case in their clemency petitions to the president, citing extensive evidence of childhood abuse. They described the long-term abuse, which included physical and psychological torture, as torture. The defense's main argument was that Montgomery had suffered from multiple mental disorders due to severe trauma and brain damage from the abuse as a child, and was not mentally capable of fully controlling her thoughts and actions at the time of the crime. Therefore, executing him is a violation of moral principles and human rights. They insisted that the death sentence be commuted to life imprisonment. Final section. Justice versus mercy. The Lisa Montgomery case quickly became a moral and judicial dilemma. On the one hand, the need to enforce justice for the innocent and brutally murdered victim, Bobby Joe Stint, and on the other, understanding the dimensions of compassion stemming from the perpetrator's childhood trauma. The Skidmore Community View. In the small town of Skidmore, where Bobby Joe Stint lived and where the crime occurred, there was little sympathy for the defense argument based on trauma. For the residents of the area and Bobby Joe's family, the planned and incredibly horrific nature of the victim's final moments justified the death penalty. They believed that Montgomery had knowingly and with a completely criminal instrument taken the life of a mother and her baby. Execution and legacy of the case. Despite the legal team's efforts and pleas for clemency, the president of the day decided not to veto it. Lisa Montgomery was executed on January 13, 2021, after 17 years in prison. She became the first federal woman to be executed by the United States government in nearly 7 decades, since 1953. The murder case of Bobby Joe Stint and Lisa Montgomery remains at the intersection of complex criminal justice issues. The nature of the crime, a crime whose purpose was not robbery or revenge, but the taking of the life of a baby at the expense of the mother. The issue of trauma, how childhood trauma affects the will and behavior of an offender in adulthood. Federal justice, the federal execution of a woman, which came after a decades-long hiatus. The case continues to stand as a reminder of the potential darkness in the human psyche and the depth of the disaster that can be unleashed by a deceptive and virtual acquaintance.